This isn't about fixing you. You're not broken. This is about recognizing what was never yours to carry in the first place. And by the end of this video, you'll see exactly what the narcissist expected from you and how those expectations rewired the way you move, even to this day. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and I'm a toxic relationship recovery coach. And if you think you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, I have a free checklist that can help you see how your experience stacks up with the typical phases of narcissistic abuse. There's a link for that in the description. So let's start with the first way narcissists trained you to serve them, and that's by demanding your undivided attention. Even if they never said it out loud, you know they expected your full attention, at least only when they wanted it. In that way, a narcissist is kind of like a cat. When they want your attention, they demand it. And when they don't want your attention, they can be downright rude about it. But if you've been through this, you know you could be mid-task, headphones in, focused on something that matters to you. And suddenly, they're talking. Not checking in with how you're doing, of course, just launching into a story or a complaint. Like your world absolutely should pause for theirs. There's no world in which it doesn't. And if you don't drop everything to listen, you're accused of being cold, of maybe having an attitude, or of not caring about them. So now you're not just distracted, you're under pressure to prove that you're still a good partner, son, daughter, or sibling. So you close your laptop, take a breath, and you shift gears. Yet again, you have to be on call whenever they want you. And of course, on the flip side, whenever you need them, they might be cold and just walk away because in that moment, they don't want the attention. And yes, if you've been through this, you know they will do this even if you don't just want attention, but you desperately need it. Maybe you desperately need their help with something or emotional support, and they have no trouble walking away. But when you go through this without realizing it, you start to preemptively set aside your focus, because you've been trained to expect that someone else's needs will come first. So even after the relationship ends, that pattern, it lingers. So someone starts talking to you while you're in the middle of something and your body reacts before your brain does. This is something that's really important to notice with all narcissistic abuse survivors. Oftentimes, your body will react before your brain does. You feel that tightness in your chest or that pit in your stomach. And in a situation like this is your body's way of bringing you to attention, to make you focus on what's happening in the present. Because you know, all of you, your mind and body knows that you'll get into trouble if you don't. So even after the abuse ends, you might still find yourself in this situation. And sometimes it can be confusing because you don't know why it's happening. There's no present danger. You might even be by yourself and just the phone rings, and that sort of interruption triggers something in your body to respond. And these are remnants of narcissistic abuse. But also out in public, you may find yourself more hyper aware of what other people are doing and whether they need or want your attention. And whenever they do, if you find yourself instantly stopping what you're doing to prioritize them, just like that, it's probably not politeness or compassion, especially if you've been through narcissistic abuse. So another thing that a narcissist expected of you that may still linger is constant validation. So they wanted to be noticed for everything: how hard they were working, how much they sacrificed, or how unfair the world was to them. And if you don't respond with enough warmth or praise or emotional energy, the mood shifted. And suddenly you were ungrateful, unsupportive, or dismissive. But I'm not sure we even need to talk about what happened when you needed encouragement. You'd get a blank stare or a subject change, or worse, subtle mockery, like you were full of yourself. You were a narcissist for even bringing it up. So most of us stop trying and hold it in. And eventually celebrating yourself starts to feel really embarrassing. It feels cringy. It feels like you're such a narcissist for celebrating your accomplishments. And it also kind of feels like a social misstep. It feels like a faux pas, like you're doing something wrong by wanting to be seen and wanting acknowledgement, or even being proud of yourself. And that doesn't just disappear. None of this stuff does when the narcissist is gone. So now when something good happens, you might brush it off before anyone else has the chance to. You might downplay it or shrink it. Or you might feel awkward accepting compliments, like you have to earn them or explain why you don't actually deserve the praise. And I can't tell you how often I hear this from my clients who tended to be highly successful in many areas of their life, but somehow end up with narcissists in relationships. And usually it's no secret that this stuff begins in childhood. But if you heard some of the accomplishments that I've heard, you might find it surprising that some of these clients have so much trouble just admitting that they did something to be proud of. And that's so incredibly sad because not only does the abuse leave them striving for the next best thing because their value is attached to it, but it also keeps them from admitting that they've done something worthy of praise. And all of this, it sounds like humility on the surface, but it's not humility, it's conditioning. It's what happens when your validation was always one-sided. When giving validation made you feel valuable, but needing it made you feel ashamed. So another thing that narcissists always expect, and it leaves a lasting mark, is emotional labor. So the narcissist created a mess. You were the one who had to hold it together. Whether it was a fight they started, a meltdown they had, or chaos they caused, it was on you to smooth it over, to stay calm, to keep the connection intact. And if you didn't, if you needed space or got overwhelmed or showed emotion that wasn't perfectly regulated, you were labeled as too sensitive and overreacting, making things worse and making it all about you. So you learned to swallow your reactions and to take on theirs, at least the reactions they wanted of you. You became the buffer, the peacekeeper, and the one who made things okay, even when nothing about it felt okay. Because the alternative was worse, which would probably be something like silence, blame, or the slow punishment of withdrawal. So over time, you stopped asking yourself how you felt in those moments. You just shifted it into fix-it mode. It became automatic. And eventually, being the emotional caretaker started to feel like part of your identity, like something you were good at. And even now, that instinct can creep in. So you walk into a room and feel the emotional temperature before you even say hello. Or someone's upset and your first thought is, what's going on with that person, right? Like that's you're hyper-focused on the person who's upset, even if it has nothing to do with you, even if you barely know them, because you've been trained to learn that when someone's upset, it could potentially spell danger for you or for other people that you care about. So it makes sense for you to scan the room and see where the danger is. And if it is someone you know and you interact with regularly, there's going to be that first, okay, what's going on with them? Number two is going to be, what did I do? What could I possibly have done to upset them? And then your mind goes into hyper speed, going through every single interaction until you find something. And you will find something. You will always find something. And then you're absolutely sure that this is what's wrong with them. And you feel guilty and you feel ashamed and you feel bad. But it's not necessarily about you. And although it may feel like you're super caring about that other person and may feel like, wow, I must love this person so much to go through all of that in my head to figure this out, it's usually not so much about love. It's a learned responsibility that you were never meant to carry. So another thing that a narcissist expects of you that will leave a lingering effect is loyalty, no matter what. So the narcissist expected your silence, your protection, your unconditional loyalty, even when they lied, manipulated, or disappeared for days. You were supposed to overlook it, to believe their version of the story, and to defend them, even when they wouldn't do the same for you. But most importantly, about all of this stuff, you were meant to keep quiet. You were meant to keep this secret from the rest of the world. And if you didn't, you were accused of being disloyal, two-faced, or disrespectful. And the shame, sometimes it's subtle, but it always runs deep. So it's not just, how could you say that? But it's, how could you say that about someone you love? It calls to question that family or relationship loyalty that so many of us feel. And it also makes you question when things happen in the future, even worse things, as these things do tend to get progressively worse. But it makes you question whether you should say something or whether you're being disloyal. So you stop telling the truth. You stop telling the truth to them, to others, even to yourself. And you start covering for them, not just because you want to protect them, but because you want to protect the hope that the relationship actually means something. And even now, you might hesitate to speak honestly about what happened. You might feel like you're betraying them just by telling the truth out loud. And if someone asks about the relationship, you feel the old urge to minimize, to smooth it over, to say, you know what, it wasn't all that bad. Or if you do say things that were bad, you feel the need to instantly follow it up with things that are not as bad. Well, this terrible thing happened, but then there were also these great things, which unfortunately really does describe most toxic relationships. They're not all bad, because if they were, it would be a lot easier to leave. But all of those backflips you're doing to explain and justify, it's not loyalty, it's conditioning. That's what happens after speaking up is labeled as betrayal, and staying quiet becomes your way of proving your love. So another expectation that narcissists have of you throughout the relationship that leaves a mark long after they're gone is forgiveness on demand. So they crossed a line. They always do eventually, right? And then they acted like you were the one making things worse by not letting it go. Sounds familiar, right? So you barely have time to process what happened, and suddenly it was, are you really still upset about that? Like as if hurt feelings have an expiration date. And they never even apologized. They just expected amnesty. It's that entitlement that we're talking about here. And if you held your ground even for a minute, you were the one dragging things out. You were the one being difficult or ruining the mood. So you learned to fold, to say, okay, let's just forget it. But unfortunately, we learned to do this because dragging it out just isn't worth the fallout. But make no mistake about it, this is also training, because this reaction stays. Even now, when someone crosses a boundary, your first instinct might be to keep the peace. So you second guess your right to be upset. You try to explain it away. Maybe they didn't mean it like that. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But if this is your reaction every time you speak your mind and someone has a different opinion, you're probably not being too sensitive. You're carrying a reflex that was always about managing someone else's comfort and not honoring your own feelings. So another way narcissists train you to meet their entitled expectations is by predicting their needs. They didn't have to say what they wanted. You were expected to just know. And if you got it right, nothing was said. You didn't get any appreciation. You didn't get applause. But if you missed the mark, you were selfish. The rules changed depending on their mood. And somehow you were always wrong. So you became hyper aware. You started scanning for cues, tone, silence, micro expressions. You learned to read between the lines, to anticipate and stay one step ahead, not because it brought you closer, but because it helped you to avoid the fallout. And over time, you even stopped waiting for people to ask what they want or need. You just assume it's your job to figure it out before they say a word. Because if someone has to ask, that means you already failed. Even now, in healthy relationships, you might find yourself tense when someone seems upset but hasn't told you why. You feel a familiar panic rise. Did I miss something? Did I let them down somehow? And it doesn't even occur to you that it might not be about you at all. That's the residue, the unspoken pressure to meet needs that were never clearly expressed and never meant to be mutual. So this is something that really sticks when emotional abuse is present in your childhood. That's going to stay with you, and you're going to get really good at reading people. The people who have played this role in childhood are the best at reading other people. And this is exactly why so many people who grow up with narcissistic parents end up being highly, highly empathetic. It's like you can feel the emotions off of other people. You can't always explain it. You can't point to a micro expression or an energy. You can't put your finger on it, but you know something's off. And you are right 99.9% of the time, if not 100, because you were trained for this. And this is a topic for another video, but this may also play a big role in why people who consider themselves empaths or highly empathetic so often attract narcissists, because it's familiar. And I also want to talk about how a narcissist trains you into silence. So they didn't just want control of the narrative, they wanted control of your voice. You were allowed to speak until you said something real or honest, something that maybe held them accountable. And then suddenly you were starting drama, or you were too reactive. You were always twisting things. So you learned to hold it in. Not because it felt right, but because it felt safer. So you tiptoed through conversations. You reworded everything to sound less threatening. And you talked to yourself more than you talked to them. And eventually that silence became internal. Even now, you might feel your throat tighten before you set a boundary. You might run through the conversation in your head a dozen times or 100 times, trying to make sure your tone won't be misunderstood. You're not even sure who you're protecting anymore. You just know it feels risky to speak. But there's another kind of silence, the kind that starts when you stop playing the game. When you stop reacting, they lose the power to pull your strings. So if you're ready for that shift right now, the next video will show you exactly what happens when you go quiet. So go ahead and watch that video and hit the like button before you go if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.